The portal shimmered in the center of Morris's apartment, its swirling alien hues casting an unearthly glow across the cluttered room. With a deep breath, Mark and Morris stepped into the unknown, their invisibility cloaks engaged and a rope tied securely around their waists to keep them connected. The moment their feet hit the alien ship's floor, they were overwhelmed by its sheer size, sleek metallic walls towering above them, glowing runes carved into every surface, and a faint hum that vibrated through the air. "This is unreal," Morris whispered, his voice trembling as his wide eyes scanned the impossibly advanced interior. But Mark's gut churned with unease. "Something's off," he murmured, glancing warily around. The portal felt different this time. Longer, heavier, like the ship itself was somehow resisting their arrival. Every step further into the massive vessel brought awe and anxiety in equal measure, and as they observed the massive furniture and equipment clearly built for creatures far larger than humans, a chilling thought struck them. These weren't the small, childlike greys they'd imagined. Whatever beings called this ship home were something else entirely, and they were nowhere to be seen. Yet. This story begins a couple of weeks ago with an innocent Boy Scout camping trip in a campground in Northern California. Mark Ferris was the embodiment of an eager Boy Scout. A wiry 13-year-old with a knack for curiosity, he lived for exploring the outdoors and earning badges that told stories of adventure. This particular summer, his troop had ventured deep into the mountains of Northern California, far from the reaches of civilization. It was their last night before heading home, and the day had been packed with hikes, knot-tying challenges, and ghost stories shared around the campfire. Everyone, including their scoutmaster, Mr. Riley, was exhausted. As the stars gleamed overhead in the unpolluted sky, the camp settled into an eerie stillness. Around 2 a.m., Mark woke to nature's call. Sliding out from his tent without waking his tent mates, Jason and Ben, he tiptoed past the other tents and found a secluded spot near a dense bush. As he relieved himself, a faint hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing moment. Then, an ethereal light burst through the foliage ahead, a hue that defied explanation, unlike any color he'd ever seen. It danced and pulsed, casting shadows in an unnatural pattern. Steeling his nerves, Mark decided to investigate the light. Every step toward the glowing anomaly heightened his pulse. His flashlight carved a path through the dense trees until he reached an opening. There stood a shimmering, elliptical portal, hovering a few inches above the ground. Beside it, a metallic table held an interesting open bag made out of strange material. Mark came closer and saw the bag contained several strange devices, like a futuristic toolbox of blinking lights, spinning gears, and translucent crystals. Mark's fingers twitched with temptation. Were these tools? Instruments? He whipped out his cell phone, snapping pictures in rapid succession. Could this be what UFO enthusiasts called proof? But the portal itself was his true fascination. A stick was lying nearby, and Mark used it to probe the shimmering surface. The stick slid through without resistance, disappearing into another realm. Emboldened, he reached out tentatively with his hand, then his head, and gasped as his vision revealed the inside of an alien spacecraft. Inside was surreal, a labyrinthine interior with smooth, gleaming walls that refracted light in impossible ways. What caught his attention first were the massive windows through which Earth floated in the black void of space. Panic bubbled up in his chest, but his curiosity anchored him. He began taking pictures, documenting the unthinkable. As Mark walked through the hallways of the alien ship, he noticed cages lined up along the walls. Each cage glowed faintly with a translucent barrier that seemed to pulse with energy. Inside the cages were animals he recognized: a deer, a wolf, a mountain lion, and others he'd never seen before. The unfamiliar creatures looked like something out of a dream, with scales that shimmered like rainbows, or bodies that seemed to float inside their cages. Mark stopped in front of the deer's cage. The animal looked frightened, its chest rising and falling quickly as it backed into the far corner. The glowing locks on the cage caught his attention. They weren't like normal locks. They were smooth and full of strange, shifting symbols that seemed to move on their own. Mark reached out to touch the controls, hoping to figure out how to open the cage. But the symbols didn't make any sense to him. The surface was cold and smooth, and no matter what he tried, the lock wouldn't budge. Before Mark could try again, a low rumbling sound came from farther down the hallway. It wasn't like a machine. It sounded alive. The deer flinched, its body trembling, and Mark froze. The sound grew louder, and Mark realized something was coming closer. His heart raced. He wanted to free the animals, but he couldn't figure out how. He stepped back from the cage, his mind spinning as he tried to decide what to do next. His heart sank, and as he stepped back to take another picture, he heard voices, low, guttural sounds that seemed to vibrate through the walls. Alien figures, clad in sleek dark suits, were approaching from a corridor. Mark became anxious. He had to leave before he was discovered. Adrenaline surged through him as he sprinted back toward the portal, praying it was still open. Relief flooded him when he saw it shimmering in the same spot. He dashed through it. Back on Earth, Mark stumbled as he collided with the table. The bag with the gizmos clattered to the ground, their lights blinking erratically. Panicking, Mark tried to pick them up, but few of the gizmos rolled down the hill while others fall close by. He picked up the table and hurried to gather the gizmos nearby, but then he noticed the portal changing colors, a deep red, followed by an unsettling black. Fearing it might close, or worse, bring alien pursuers, he fled, clutching one of the devices in his hand. Mark's pulse thundered in his ears as he crouched behind a massive stump, its rugged surface pressing into his back. His hands trembled, clutching clumps of dirt and moss as he battled the instinct to flee. The aliens' pursuit might have been relentless, but curiosity burned brighter than fear. He had to see them. He had to know what kind of beings had emerged from that otherworldly portal. Positioning his head just behind a dense bush, sprouting beside the tree, Mark carefully shifted a few stray branches for a clearer view. The cool air carried the faint crackle of energy from the portal as two figures stepped through. Mark's breath caught in his throat. From this vantage point, he could observe their every move without exposing himself. The aliens stood motionless near the table, their sleek forms oddly imposing against the backdrop of the forest. As Mark's gaze remained fixed on the aliens, he noticed more intricate details that set them apart from anything his imagination could have conjured. Their translucent skin revealed faint, pulsing veins of bioluminescent light coursing through their bodies, casting an ethereal glow in the fading sunlight. The tendrils crowning their heads moved with a subtle rhythm, as if sensing the environment around them, or communicating through an invisible frequency. Each tendril seemed to respond independently, glowing faintly in hues of violet and indigo. Their eyes, shimmering like polished gemstones, did not blink, but rather shifted and expanded, as though capturing light and information in ways Mark couldn't fathom. When one of them turned slightly toward the tree he hid behind, he felt the weight of its gaze, not out of malice, but with an intensity that suggested it could see through every layer of matter, including Mark himself. Their silvery attire seemed almost alive, rippling and adjusting as they moved. It hugged their forms with a precision that hinted at advanced technology. More than just clothing, it appeared to serve as armor, life support, or perhaps even a symbiotic extension of their own bodies. It emitted faint tones, reminiscent of a low hum or a heartbeat, blending seamlessly into the ambient sounds of the forest. As they handled the devices on the table, their six-fingered hands moved in synchronized precision, their claw-like digits clicking softly with each movement. Mark realized they weren't simply retrieving the devices. They were scanning, analyzing, and perhaps reprogramming them, evidenced by the occasional flicker of light across the device's surfaces. Mark stood frozen, his heart pounding as the afterimage of the collapsing portal lingered in his mind. His hand instinctively reached for his pocket where his cell phone rested, useless now. The realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. He had witnessed something extraordinary, something no human had ever seen, and he had forgotten to document it. Anger welled up, frustration clouding his thoughts, but as quickly as it came, it faded into an unsettling calm. Questions flooded his mind, each more chilling than the last. What if he had taken a picture? Would the aliens have noticed the click of the camera, the glare of the flash cutting through the shadows? A cold sweat broke out on his brow as he imagined their weird eyes turning toward him, their tendrils quivering with awareness and their clawed hands poised to act. Mark's imagination spiraled further into darker possibilities. What if snapping the picture had sealed his fate? What if the aliens had deemed him a threat, or a curiosity to be studied? He envisioned the cold, translucent barrier of a cage closing around him, trapping him among the terrified animals, his pleas unheard. Or worse, his mind conjured a horrifying scene, a sterile alien lab where their delicate yet precise fingers explored his anatomy, dissecting and probing in a quest for understanding. As he stood there, gripped by the weight of these thoughts, Mark's frustration was replaced by relief. Perhaps his failure to act had saved him. In the grand scheme of things, his survival outweighed the loss of proof. He glanced once more at the empty spot, where the portal's energy had folded in on itself, leaving no trace of its existence. The silence of the forest seemed louder now, pressing down on him as his thoughts raced. He patted the pocket of his jacket, reassured by the weight of his phone still nestled inside. He still had the other pictures, snapshots of the ship, the table, and even the faint glow of the portal before the aliens emerged. They weren't perfect, but they were something tangible, something real. Those would have to suffice. Mark's grip on his phone tightened. The images would serve as proof, a record of what had happened here, even if they couldn't capture the awe or fear he had felt in the moment. But more than that, they were his only tether to the truth of what he'd seen. A part of him wondered if, one day, he might wish he had no proof at all, that maybe ignorance was safer when it came to a universe capable of such wonders and terrors. Taking a shaky breath, he resolved to move forward. The world might never believe what he'd witnessed, but Mark knew that from this moment on, nothing would ever be the same, not for him and not for humanity. Mark returned to camp, breathless and exhilarated. His cell phone was a treasure trove of evidence, pictures of the portal, the gizmos, the alien ship, the cages. But the device in his hand was another story. It was small, palm-sized, and emitted a faint hum. He tucked it into his backpack, vowing to keep it hidden. Mark slipped into the tent as quietly as a shadow, careful not to disturb the rhythmic breaths of his sleeping companions. The faint scent of damp earth clung to the air, mingling with the warmth of the campfire's dying embers outside. Pulling his phone from his pocket, he checked the time, 5:00 a.m. The glowing numbers seemed surreal, a reminder that his otherworldly encounter had spanned only 3 hours. Yet the weight of it, the adrenaline, the terror, and the awe, it all felt like a lifetime compressed into the stillness of the early morning. He sank onto his sleeping bag, every muscle in his body aching. In just 1 hour, Mr. Riley would get up and will wake everyone for breakfast. Lying in his sleeping bag, he stared at the tent ceiling, weighing his options. Should he tell Mr. Riley and the troop? Could he trust anyone not to hand over the evidence to the government? Or should he try to figure out the alien device himself? A deep sense of responsibility settled over him. He had stumbled upon something that could change humanity's understanding of the universe. The phone felt heavy in his hand. The images he had taken, of the ship, the portal, the glowing devices, flashed through his mind. Once again, Mark struggled with questions in his mind. Should he share the pictures? Or would they only invite questions, disbelief, and possibly danger? A decision loomed as the minutes ticked by. For now, though, he let his exhaustion take over, lying back and letting his mind drift to the sounds of the forest waking up around him. Mark's summer had gone from mundane badge earning to a cosmic mystery, and he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. As the troop bustled around him, rolling sleeping bags and stowing gear, Mark drifted through the motions, his thoughts replaying the night's events like a broken record. He couldn't shake the image of the aliens, their glimmering forms and the weight of their gaze, as if they had glimpsed straight into his soul. Every sound of the forest, the rustling leaves, the snapping twigs, seemed heightened, and Mark couldn't help but feel like he was being watched, though he knew the aliens were long gone. Jason and Ben kept glancing his way, their whispered guesses growing louder as the morning progressed. Mark caught snippets of their conversation, Everything from theories about bears to far-fetched jokes about Bigfoot. He wanted to laugh, to join in and distract himself, but the weight of the truth made his throat tighten. What could he say? That he had stumbled onto something beyond anything they could imagine. That he had stood just feet away from beings from another world. As the group began their hike back to the trailhead, Mr. Riley's voice cut through the morning air, leading with a cheerful story about a time his tent was overrun by raccoons. The others laughed, their spirits light, but Mark trudged along at the back of the group, his gaze fixed on the dirt path. Every so often, he'd glance over his shoulder at the dense forest behind them, half expecting to see a shimmer of light or hear the hum of a portal reopening. But there was nothing. Just the endless trees, the soft crunch of boots on the trail, and the steady rhythm of the troop's conversation ahead of him. Mark tightened his grip on the straps of his backpack, the phone tucked away inside, its photos haunting him as much as the memories. He hadn't decided yet if he'd tell anyone. For now, he was carrying the secret alone. As the group trekked down the mountain trails, Mark walked in silence, trailing behind his friends. His backpack felt heavier than usual, though it wasn't the weight of camping gear. It was the burden of the gizmo hidden inside. The artifact represented something incredible, something that could change how people saw the universe. But with it came a decision Mark wasn't sure he was ready to make. When the troop finally reached the parking lot at the base of the mountain, Mark sighed in relief. A yellow school bus waited for them, the driver leaning against its side with a steaming cup of coffee. Everybody got inside the bus, and the bus driver started a conversation with Mr. Riley. The trip back took a couple of hours. Mark used this time to finally catch some well-deserved sleep. As the school bus rolled into the familiar parking lot, Mark blinked awake, his mind still clouded with the haze of restless dreams. The rhythmic hum of the bus engine had lulled him into a shallow sleep, offering a brief escape from the weight of his thoughts. He sat up straighter, peering out the window as the scene unfolded. Parents clustered in small groups near their cars, their faces lighting up with eager anticipation. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the lot, glinting off windshields and warming the chilly spring air. Mark's eyes quickly found his parents among the crowd, their expressions a mixture of excitement and relief. His mom waved enthusiastically, and his dad gave a small nod, his arms crossed as he leaned against the family car. Around him, his friends began gathering their belongings, their voices filling the bus with chatter about the trip. Their favorite moments, funny mishaps, and exaggerated tales of bravery. Mark remained seated for a moment longer, his phone still tucked securely in his pocket. The memories of the night's encounter weighed heavily on him, contrasting sharply with the carefree energy of the group. As Jason and Ben called out to him, urging him to hurry up, Mark forced himself to smile and grabbed his bag. He stepped off the bus, bracing himself for the questions he knew his parents would ask, and wondering how much of the truth he was ready to share. Mark said goodbye to Jason and Ben, avoiding their questioning gazes. "Catch you guys later," he mumbled, before thanking Mr. Riley and the bus driver for the trip. His parents were waiting with his younger sister Martha, who ran up and hugged him excitedly. "You smell like dirt," she giggled. Mark's father, Joe, patted him on the shoulder. "You look like you had an exciting time. Want to grab burgers at the diner and tell us all about it?" Mark shook his head. "Thanks, Dad, but I think I just need some rest. I'm wiped out." Joe frowned, but Martha tugged him toward their car. "Let's get home then," she said brightly. As they drove home, Mark stared out the window, clutching his backpack tightly. His father tried to spark conversation, asking about knots, campfire stories, and hiking, but Mark only offered vague answers. His mind was consumed by the gizmo and the pictures on his phone. When they arrived home, Mark bolted upstairs, telling his family he was going to nap. Martha teased him for skipping lunch, but Mark didn't respond. He locked his bedroom door, pulled the gizmo from his backpack, and set it carefully on his desk. It gleamed with faint, otherworldly energy. Mark pressed the buttons methodically and discovered that the gizmo attaches to things, activating its gravity-defying capabilities, watching as his desk lifted into the air and hovered effortlessly. Testing the device on various objects, he confirmed its versatility. It could manipulate wood, fabric, plastic, metal, and even his own body. But as he experimented, a deeper realization sank in. This wasn't just a gizmo for lifting things. It was part of a larger system, a tool for the alien ship's mission to gather specimens from Earth. He imagined the cages he'd seen, the animals trapped inside, and shivered at the thought of what the aliens might do with them. Was the gizmo just a harmless tool like a car jack or a screwdriver for us, or something more sinister? When Mark tried the gizmo on himself again, his bedroom transformed into an aerial playground. He floated, swam through the air, and even peeked out of his second-floor window, marveling at the view of his neighborhood. But the thrill was fleeting, replaced by a nagging fear. What would happen if someone else found out about it? Mark knew his family wouldn't understand. His father, a cautious and practical man, would probably confiscate the gizmo and call the authorities. Jason and Ben might be supportive at first, but the temptation to share such an extraordinary secret might overwhelm them. Mark imagined government agents knocking on his door, taking away his discovery, and burying it in a classified lab, never to be seen again. He wrestled with his options. Should he tell his family and friends, risking the loss of the gizmo, or keep it hidden and explore its capabilities alone? The weight of the decision pressed down on him like gravity itself. Finally, Mark chose secrecy. The gizmo wasn't just an alien artifact. It was an extension of his curiosity, a gateway to understanding something far beyond the mundane. He couldn't risk losing it, not yet. He vowed to keep exploring, to learn everything he could about the gizmo before revealing its existence. It was a choice born not only of fear, but of awe and responsibility. Before he drifted off to sleep, Mark looked at the pictures on his phone again. The cages, the spaceship, the Earth seen from space. The gizmo was incredible, but it was just one piece of the puzzle. There was so much more to understand about the aliens, their motives, and the technology they wielded. Mark resolved that his adventure wasn't over. He wouldn't just be a passive keeper of secrets. He would actively seek answers. Perhaps someday, when he'd uncovered enough, he would share his discoveries with the world. For now, though, he would be the Boy Scout who defied gravity, the keeper of a mystery that was as thrilling as it was terrifying.